Welcome, pudding people, to another episode of Everybody Loves Pudding. I am your host, Ken Seymour. Today, I am super excited. I have a guest that is an actor, a director, a producer, and a Delta legacy, I believe, at this point. We have the magnificent Griff Furst with us.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks for having me. And I am a Delta legacy. Faber did recruit me.
There's no way. You have to have been talked to about this about 1,000,000 times by now. Just being part of a family that has, so much talent in it between your dad and you and your brother. It's just there's got to be a lot of questions that kind of go around everywhere. I know personally, I grew up with a variety of things, including Animal House and Babylon 5, because I'm a huge sci-fi geek. And I just kind of wonder, what's it like to be in an environment when you're growing up and your dad is already part of this industry? And did you get exposed to that a lot, or were you kind of kept away from it?
Oh, no, absolutely. I feel like I spent more time on set than I did in school. It's such a great place to be, for nothing else, for the craft service. It's like the spread on those big budget sets is it's like a wedding every day. Babylon 5 was one of the most fun sets to grow up on. That ran for about 6 years, and my dad was an actor in it, but he also directed several episodes. And so I must have been, I'd say 11 to 16 I was when that show was on, and I would go as often as I could. I'd bring friends down to Sun Valley where the sound stages were, and they had these beautiful, massive sets in there. And whichever one they weren't using, like if they were on stage 6, I would just go on stage 5 and I'd stay there all day, just on the spaceship by myself. And sometimes there'd be like a construction guy getting in his way, but it was a great place to be and grow up. I also grew up on St. Elsewhere and the Dream Team Animal Houses before I was born. I loved it. It was a great intro to the industry and an opportunity to kind of observe really, really talented people in all departments kind of working. I didn't realize I was observing at that age, but certainly I certainly was.
Did you ever have any instances where you were around and about, and you had what may have not seemed like much of an important encounter with somebody, but later you go, oh, I actually met this fantastic actor or this fantastic director, and I just had no idea at the time?
Oh, nonstop. I mean, there's so many of those, from like Michael Keaton, like on the Dream Team. I was young when I was on there, but I remember I was playing with the prop handcuffs, and I handcuffed him to the prop cart, just playing around. The prop guy didn't have the keys. And then I fast forward, 30 years later, I worked with him on a movie called The Founder, and I remind him of that. We joked about that. It happens all the time. Even there was a gentleman, I had a small role in a sci-fi channel movie, and there was a really fantastic actor named Tony Amendola, who I connected with. I was very young again. And once I realized I really needed training, Tony was an actor I really respected. And so I called him and I said, hey, what do you suggest? And he led me to a place called the Beverly Hills Playhouse, where I studied and trained and really learned how to master the craft there. And those are just countless. It's like such a small community, and I feel everybody's really supportive. So there's countless times I've called on people and picked their brain about various areas of expertise that could lead me on the right path when I was coming up.
Well, the Beverly Hills Playhouse, that's got a history in and of itself. Now, my understanding is that the acting techniques that they teach are a little bit different than a lot of other acting studios. Is that accurate?
I don't know, because it's the only place I ever trained. I was doing another interview, and somebody had brought up some controversy surrounding it, which I was actually completely unaware of. I spent a lot of time there, like in sometimes 60 hours a week between going to class and studying. Like, you spend a lot of time there, but I was always just focused on the work. There's a Scientology base there, like a large percentage of people were Scientologists, but not everybody. And it didn't really make its way into the teaching, not overtly anyways. Nobody ever pressured you to do it. So for me, it was a fantastic experience, because the teachers, very perceptive and just really good at what they did. But I guess there was some other stuff before, after, during I was there that was, I guess, questionable, but I never really experienced any of it personally.
Yeah, I tend to stay away from subjects that are too polarizing anyway. As soon as you start talking about religion or politics or anything like that, then everything becomes very serious, and we start to go into the public radio portion of the interview. And did you feel that at any time? I just
We
that's not us,
we can do that. It's not a topic I broach in public very often, but it's one of my favorites. But it's usually just confined to my own head.
right? Well, when you have a choice between something serious like that and instead talking about creating stories that other people get to enjoy, I know which one I tend to fall onto the side of. It just seems to be so much better. What was your favorite takeaway? I mean, you had to have been involved in a lot of stage production at that point too, in terms of plays, rather than being necessarily behind a camera. Were you involved in any really fun stage plays?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's kind of where I started. And then growing up, my parents also started in theaters, so we were constantly going to shows, and that's actually what kind of gave me the bug, is like seeing those kids in Les Miserables or whatever it is, just having fun. I was like, wow, I want to do that. But yes, at the Playhouse, there was tons. We were putting up tons of one-act plays and tons of scene study. And I mean, the biggest takeaway that I learned there was, before going there, I always thought it was all about just, knowing the lines and doing your thing. And I didn't realize until I started there, just the amount of time that you can spend on one simple page of dialogue or one scene, to really like get it in you and feel it. It's like, prior to going there, I'd get an audition, I'd spend, an hour or something, just pounding it in my head and just doing it. But then after that, it's like I would analyze a page for 10 hours and then just completely nail it, because it's so, and you could say it backwards, forwards in Latin, and you just really feel what the character's feeling. So that was probably the biggest takeaway, is just knowing that you can spend an infinite amount of time on a piece of material, and it's only going to get better. Like the reason Brando's so good in Streetcar Named Desire in the film version is because he put it up something insane. It's like 850 times, not including rehearsal, just 850 shows on Broadway as Stanley Kowalski before he did it on film. So no shit, he's good. It's like he knows that character so well. He doesn't have to think. He can just think like the character. He doesn't have to think about what he's saying. He knows it so well.
Well, I'm glad to hear also that your home environment is everybody is kind of on the same page. I originally saw that your mom was a lawyer, and I thought it's like, oh, there's a potential. It's like, okay, dad and sons want to goof off, and mom's the one that has to rein them in. She is the iron hand that keeps everything moving forward.
Yeah, that's totally the dynamic. And then I married a woman who's very similar to that. We're the artists and we have fun, and she's always the ones telling us to come back to reality.
Well, I saw a picture of your house, and it is just absolutely gorgeous. I love that stonework on the outside. I had to say something about that, just because I like too many things, and architecture is one of those things. I don't know if you spend any time on YouTube in your free time, but find those videos. Like, we're going to take a tour of this fabulous Beverly Hills mansion, and it's on the market for $73,122,000.
Oh yeah, I do. I absolutely. My wife was in real estate. We've renovated a bunch of houses. I love that too. It's like I like it almost as much as storytelling is just architecture and building houses and creating cool spaces.
So, okay, I have to ask this too. It's kind of one of those things, when you've been in the industry as long as you have, and you've had so many different hats to be exposed to so many different sides of the business, and been exposed to a lot of people. If you had the power to change time, and you could insert yourself into any past project, film, television, stage play in any capacity, if you had that power, what would you put yourself
in? That's awesome. There's so many things. I mean, there's every era of filmmaking is so, it's so different, right? And I have fantasized about what it would be how it would be to be in the 50s or the 70s or even the 90s, like during the independent era when everything really boomed. And that would just be so incredible. I mean, the past always seems so nostalgic, right?
Right.
And maybe people will look at this time period and think the same thing probably about TV, because it's the golden era of TV, right?
That is
Uh,
true.
but I don't know a specific project. I love cinema from all the decades, but there's something I love the 70s, the 50s and 70s and 90s, like all the films from those decades. Just for some reason, like 60s I kind of skipped, I guess. I mean, I'm sure there's some phenomenal films from the 60s, but I love the films from the 50s, 70s, and 90s. Those are like, it's like my jam right there. So any of them, put me in any of those pictures with the directors of that time, and I'd be happy as hell.
Yeah, there's almost no way to go wrong. There's so much good stuff that you could go into in the past. Well, how about this instead? In your experience, as you were acting, coming up and acting, did you have a particular scene where you were involved in something? Because again, you've got kind of a different perspective. As a consumer, we only see the finished product, but seeing it from behind the scenes and in the process of making it, there's a different feel that goes into it and a different mindset. So did you have you ever had a scene that you were acting opposite somebody, and for whatever reason that scene still sticks with you? It's like whether it was the chemistry you had with the person that you were working with, or the director made a suggestion to you. It's like, oh, I hadn't thought about it this way, or the production design was so on spot that you're waiting to see, the viewer sees the good part and you're behind and you say, oh, there's where the styrofoam is. Do you have anything that still just kind of resonated with you and sticks with you to this day?
Yeah, I really like my experience on a show called Banshee. It was a Cinemax show, and I'm in the pilot, and I play what you think is going to be the lead character, who then gets murdered about 20 minutes in, and then the actual lead character steals my identity and becomes that person. And we worked on that. It's a nice, really meaty scene. The ups and downs, and a great ending to that scene. And I just really liked the team. It was Greg Atanis was directing. He also wrote it. Anthony Starr, who's now on The Boys, was in it, who's a very gracious and awesome actor. Frankie Fassone. It was just really good people making something that everybody really believed in and putting a lot of love into it. Like, we had a lot of stunt rehearsals. The stunt coordinators were great. And there was just a lot of creative juices and imagination flowing. So I really like that experience. I always think of that one fondly. And I think the finished result is fantastic too. And it kind of shows the passion everybody had for that pilot episode of that series. That was always a fun one. I also like to think about Now You See Me. I'm in that movie briefly, but it was a very, very large budget. And speaking of like styrofoam and stuff, there was in the scene, there's this big crescendos to this moment where the lid gets blown off the safe and reveals that there's nothing in the safe. It's like balloon animals and stuff. But we spent an entire day messing with this safe, and all they had to do was push the button, and the special effects guys were supposed to let the safe thing fall. It took all day to make it happen. And I think we ended up just doing it manually, like with a fishing string, and letting it go. But it was supposed to be like this big thing. It was just funny to me because I've done a lot of and directed a lot of smaller movies too, where you have those exact same problems. So it's always funny to see that, like, no matter what budget or what level you're on, you're always dealing with simple physics can trip you up and cost you an entire day of photography. It's just something simple like a trigger on a button not working, and then you have 400 people standing around waiting for it to work.
Is that where you got introduced to Morgan Freeman the first time?
That is the first time I met Morgan. Yeah, it was in that scene, actually. I was so surprised how soft he speaks. He speaks when you're talking to him. It's just so subtle, but it just, for some reason, the way that it connects to the microphone and resonates, he sounds like God. But when you're next to him, you're like, wow, that is Morgan, but it's the decibel is so much lower than you would expect it to be. But then you listen to it on playback and it's booming. It's like it's magic.
Right. I was actually going to ask you if there's some way that you could connect me with him, because I have this idea where he just narrates the rest of my life and follows me around.
That would be excellent.
And he opened the jar of peanut butter. Oh, it sounds so much better when you do it than when I do.
I'm sure like a mix between the AI technology and like Siri, and like you probably make that happen. At least get it to be on your Waze app, right?
That'd be great. Well, how about this? It's a big shift to go from acting to other elements of the business. Now, yeah, I mentioned we were just talking. We talked a little bit about the directing and the producing. Did you ever do any other elements? Were you kind of a jack of all trades? Like, are we going to see you as a gaffer at some point in something? Did you? What were some of the learning things going to these other jobs in creating film and television?
I'm really fascinated by the whole process and everybody's job and what it means to do something well. So I'm the first time I was on set was as a PA. It was for a commercial company, and that sucked because that was just stapling papers. I think I lasted one day, and I was like, no, I'll do anything but staple papers because I can't learn anything from it. I already knew how to staple papers. And then the second job, it was a really small project that I was actually the sound mixer on, and I was in bands and such, and so I had some frame of knowledge. It was super young though, like not even legal age. But I had somebody, I was working with somebody who kind of like taught me the levels and how you mark the things and how you get, and that was really interesting and helpful. It's not what I wanted to do, but it was within my circle of interest. Good audio, right? And from there, I mean, my main focus was and always has been on acting. Like I love that. But having grown up on these sets with my father and observing people do things well, you know, I noticed, especially on the low budget productions, there was kind of a lack of expertise in certain departments. And so when I started directing these smaller movies in my early 20s, I would hop in and camera operate and pull focus. I DP'd a feature that Lionsgate picked up. It was kind of like I've observed enough to be pretty good at some of the stuff, and I was also very much of like, I'll just say yes, that I can do anything. Especially when the risk was low. It's like there's some of these were tiny movies, and so people would see that I know how to operate. They'd say, "Hey, will you DP this thing?" And I'd say yes, even though I'd never done it in my life. And then I go get it was kind of pre-YouTube, so I'd like go get books and like study it. I'd call DPs that I know. I'd ask them things. I'd just show up and do it. Very much learn by doing. So I think I've been in every department really. And I appreciate what everybody does, except art department. I've never done that, but I mean, good production design is critical for the image. It doesn't matter how good the cinematography is if the production design isn't good. But I'll go work in any department. I love it. Sometimes it's more fun than producing because it's so like, I like being hands-on and like touching things. So sometimes I'll just jump into another department. So let me pull focus on that thing. Let me get in there.
What was maybe was there something that surprised you that was an aspect of being a director or being a producer that you didn't really realize was part of the gig until you took the reins? That's maybe something that we don't see when we're viewing the finished product.
As a producer, nothing surprised me because it's all been such a slow burn that creeps up on you, right? But having, I think the last picture I just did, Half Baked, is my 37th feature, and it really, after doing so many, you kind of realize that you're really, as a producer, really the ringleader of a total circus. It's just like it's problem after problem, but it's good things. I mean, as long as you know that that's what you're stepping into, it's an exciting job. You know that you're going to deal with a lot of unexpected issues, whether it's the mafia or the breakfast not showing up on time. It's like there's going to be something every day, and we try to make it so I always say that if you have 10 problems a day, you're really good at your job, because if you don't prep the movie right, you're going to have 100 problems a day. It becomes unmanageable and nobody's happy. So we try to only have 10 problems a day, but those 10 problems a day are often completely unpredictable, completely out of left field, and it's always something new. Like I got a call on the last one that we had 2 separate trucks in 2 different parts of town, both get into car accidents at the exact same time, and somebody's got to deal with it. So you got to deal with both of those things. So just the amount of issues that you face when you have 200 people working on their own jobs and everything kind of funnels back to you. it's always surprising me. It's always surprising to me how much trouble a production can get into in one day that you have to eloquently get out of. And that's kind of the art of producing, to keep everything on track and keep the director's vision in a linear, concise track, right? Because there's a lot of things, a lot of roadblocks trying to stop you.
Now I have to ask, did Jeff Ross or Harlan Williams make anything more difficult in keeping at least keeping a straight face while you're in the process of making
Definitely that part. I mean, both of those gentlemen were exceeded my expectations just in their graciousness and the content they brought just out of their head. They're both great at improv, obviously. So they took what's on the page and they plussed it to the 10th degree. It's like they both brought in so much unexpected moments, so many alternate moments. They were the hardest to cut simply because they gave us so much great stuff. Like Jeff had new, like hilarious gut-busting lines on every take. So then in post, we have to go through and say, okay, what are we going to keep and what are we going to lose? Because everything's funny. And I'm hoping that we can get some of those outtakes in the end of the picture, because I think everybody should see how funny these things are.
I'll tell you what, Jeff Ross has been one of my favorite comedians for a long time. I've always been a fan of a great roast, and having him involved with anything is generally a guarantee to at least get a few laughs here and there. But that cast, just all in all, was really, really solid. How much easier is it when you can get a group of people that all seem to have so much that they bring to the table to make a project better?
Infinitely easier. I mean, from cast and crew. I think Spielberg said that 80% of directing is good casting. I may be misquoting him, but it was something like that I read 20 years ago, and it stuck with me because it's so true. It's like, if you end up, I mean, we've all been in the situation, especially on smaller movies, where you end up with somebody who may have been good in the audition, but they don't quite nail it when you get on set, and you end up spending so much longer in the scene trying to get it, and it's never as good as you want it to be because it's not what you expected. Whereas, if you have a great cast, there's very little conversation that needs to go on because they're essentially directing their own performances, and so the director can worry about other things. And then with crew too, I mean, it's always worth, something I've also learned through experience. I mean, it's always worth taking the time to make sure that you have the right person. It's very easy to meet somebody who seems passionate about something and not really vet them or check references and just bring them on, and you'll have problems. Like it's worth taking the time to, if you haven't worked with somebody before. I mean, at this point, we work with most people that get brought on, but if it's somebody new, to like really vet them, do multiple interviews with them, and just make sure that you're getting what you're looking for. It's going to make the job so much easier. I mean, if you crew up and cast up well, it becomes a breeze.
Yeah, I know a lot of people tend to start to develop groups of people that they work with repeatedly just because they know that these people are ones they can bring it every single time, and they're dependable and people like them, that sort of a thing.
100%. Yeah. The tricky thing is when you get into the positions like production office coordinator. It seems boring, such a critical position though, but or first AC or a camera operator, because the camera operators might become a DP, a production coordinator is going to become a UPM. So when you find somebody really great, you're like, oh my God, I got to keep this person. Next thing you know, 2 movies later, they're like, no, I'm a UPM now. And so you lose them. And so there's a few positions that you're constantly having to refill people, because if they're really good, they're going to get promoted into a better position.
That makes sense. One thing that I always wondered was when you have so many instances where a film will have multiple producers. I mean, some people are going to get the stamp of producer, and they're not really so much involved directly in the production of the film. But when you have multiple people that are all in the same position, how does that work? How does that coordinate? How do you avoid bumping heads and doing the same thing that the other person is doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. It does become kind of a little bit more of an abstract thing that you have to feel. So like on Half Baked, I am the only producer on that picture. So it's more work, but there's less coordinating to do because you just know that you're responsible for everything. On the Morgan Freeman picture, I had 3 very active producing partners on that one. And so you really have to start talking right at the top of the whole process and figure out what people's interests and experiences are. And then it kind of becomes a meritocracy. It's like, and I can write, I can do a bunch of different things, but if I'm working with 2 other producers who also have a lot of experience in screenplay, I'll say, okay, well, while you're working on that, so I don't have to do that now, even though I love doing that. That's all your baby. You know, I'm going to work on this other part of it, which it may even be like some back of the house stuff. Like I'll set up the companies and we kind of break out the duties. Again, with a superhuman effort and little sleep, one producer is, and a great crew, one producer is capable of running the whole show. But it does make it easier to a degree if you can be like, oh, this person is great. Like there's a guy named Tom Vitelli I work with a lot. He's great with screenplay and story and production design and costumes. So when we work together, it's kind of an automatic thing. It's like, okay, you're going to take the lead on all these departments. I'm going to take the lead on all these departments. These are our strengths, and we report back to each other several times a day on what's going on.
So here's a thing. So you've got all these experiences. You know the people you've worked with, you know who's good. Are you bringing a lot of this? Because I was trying to find a little bit of information specifically. I guess I'm asking about your company, Curmudgeon Films.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering what inspired that creation of that company to, is this like, I'm tired of working for other companies doing these things. I can do this. I know these people. Let's bring them together and make something happen. How did that come to be? What is it that you envision Curmudgeon Films to be?
It kind of all started from that yes I can mentality, and just grew from there. Meaning that I was just acting. And I was on a set where I could see the production was cutting some corners they shouldn't, and things just weren't running as smoothly. So I had sitting at the monitor next to the executive producer of the show, and I said, you should let me jump in and do this. And they went, okay, go ahead and do it. So then I produced something for them, or maybe I AD'd something for them. And then I kept getting put in these management kind of positions of production. And as I got deeper and deeper into it, I started getting experience in things that I was never trained for, I went to school for, like financing and other things, to delivery of the picture. Then I was a creative development. And pretty soon I'm like, well, I'm doing every single thing here. I'm communicating with the networks and the studios. They all know me. I'm delivering the pictures. So, I'm just going to reach out and ask for my own, ask some people to send me my own orders, we called them, which is basically a negative pickup agreement to make a movie. And people were very receptive to that, started sending me orders to create movies for them. And they all exceeded expectations. So they kept coming. And we did that for a long time. A lot of them were TV movies. We do them really quick. And then, shortly after that, after I made enough of those TV movies, which start to get a little repetitive because they're very similar, right? I very well versed in story. I'm always reading all the time. So I started acquiring properties that spoke to me. There's a project called Cold Moon by an excellent writer named Michael McDowell. A Jodi Picoult movie called My Sister's Keeper. 57 Seconds is based on something by E.C. Tubbs. You Might Be the Killer is actually based on a Twitter exchange by Sam Sykes and Chuck Wendig. And so just started really collecting things that I thought would make good stories and then creating original material from there. So it just kind of, I forgot what the question was, but it just kind of happened like that.
The question really is less relevant than the answer. But so, I mean, you seem to have a great deal of passion for the industry. Do you have a predisposition to a certain genre? Are you saying, you got that, there was a horror movie was your first directing gig, right?
Yes, yes.
So it's like, I love horror, I love suspense or film noir. Or do you just like everything?
I'm truly a fan of everything. It's like music. Like I love rap. I love heavy metal. I'll turn on country if I'm feeling like it. Sometimes I'm rocking Mozart on my iTunes. Like my playlist is stupid. It just goes, it bounces so far. And I'm the same way with movies. It really just it's like what I'm in the mood for. I was a freak about horror when I was younger, and I still love like any good horror movie. I'm gonna watch it. Like I love horror films, and that's why I made my first movie as a horror film. I mean, I had like probably every horror movie in existence on VHS. I had those 2 VHS tapes, and like I just constantly I've been renting 4 horror movies. I record them all and I watch them over and over again. I love horror, but I love science fiction, love drama. I mean, there's no genre movie I don't like. If it's good, if it's a good story, well told, I'm in 100%.
I always thought that there was something that horror had that other genres don't. I don't know if you feel the same way, but if you
What
watch,
is it?
well, if you watch a good drama, you're wrapped, you're in it, you're in the place. If you watch a bad drama, it's just, I don't want to be here. I don't want to see this.
It's
It,
true.
if you watch a good horror film, it's like, man, this is amazing. If you watch a terrible horror film, it's like, man, this is great. This is so funny. I love it still. I mean, it's almost no downside when you're watching horror. No matter how it turns out, you're going to be entertained.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's like it's almost like if the performances are excellent in a horror film, it's almost like a pleasant surprise, right? Like Friday the 13th Part 4. Corey Feldman, Crispin Glover, those guys are so good in that movie. And the script, there's nothing in the script. There's nothing in the script for them to work with. It's like there's no meat in the scenes. They're just teenagers getting killed off. But they're so committed to their roles. It's like it's such a pleasant surprise when that happens in a horror movie. But even, Friday the 13th Part 8, terrible. I still love it.
It's usually at least something that you can get out of it. Now, okay, well, how about this? Since we're talking about horror, favorite horror film? Do you have one?
Oh, do I have a favorite horror film? God, there's so many. I mean, I probably have like my top 10 favorite horror films. The Shining, Jaws, The Ring. Those are all excellent. Psycho. Trying to think of all the ones that I'm showing my 9-year-old son, because those are the ones I've been revisiting recently. He loves it. It might be genetic because him and my daughter, who's 3, they all love being scared. It's like they gravitate towards the scary stuff. Like it's just something about it makes them feel something. I mean, I love Polanski's apartment dramas, like The Tenant. I don't know if you've seen that. It's part of the Rosemary's Babies, which is kind of like an unofficial trilogy, but The Tenant is awesome. I'd have to, the more will pop in my head and I'll circle back to it, but I love a good horror movie. I just watched the Twilight Zone movie the other night. It's great too. I mean, I love it. I didn't realize there's some dark things in there for a PG movie. Like the first episode, it's like a really racist guy who ends up in a concentration camp. I totally forgot that. And my 9-year-old son had so many questions because that, as it is in 2023, and luckily that doesn't really exist in his world. Like, so he's like, what is all this? And what is he saying? And what's that word mean? I'm like, oh shit. Now I got to explain all this stuff to him.
Yeah, that can be a little rough. I always kind of gravitate I like the ones that, like Serpent and the Rainbow. They're like trippy, or
Yeah, it's super trippy. Yeah.
Mouth of Madness. That was another great one from back in the day.
Yeah, I've been waiting for that to be remade. They were supposed to do it with Tom Cruise and Guillermo del Toro, I think, and I was looking so forward to that, and I don't think it's moving forward.
That makes me sad. But remakes be good. You were involved in a remake of a film that I loved that was from the 80s, The Hitchhiker.
Oh, The Hitchhiker. Yes, I was.
That always stuck with that original because I was a kid when that original, at least I'm fairly certain it was the original, came out, and that, I don't know, scarred me a little bit, but still love
it. I love that too. I actually haven't seen The Hitchhiker that I'm in, but the episode of The Twilight Zone, The Hitchhiker, is really good.
Yeah. Okay, so how about this? We talked a little bit just about genres, and to combine several things all together and meeting Morgan Freeman. I was hoping we could talk a little bit about 57 Seconds. That film just sounds like it is a fun sci-fi romp. The ability to jump back in time just briefly almost kind of feels like it's a more edgier version of Groundhog Day. What what was kind of that film about, and how did you get involved with that?
So that one, it is a great sci-fi romp, and it's like Groundhog Day if Bill Murray only went back 57 seconds each time. We had a lot of fun writing that script and trying to think of what we would do, and therefore what the lead character should do if you could reset time 57 seconds. That one came about in an interesting way because we made a movie called You Might Be the Killer. I mentioned it earlier. It was a comedy horror movie. Did really well for the distributor. And they said right away, we want to do something else with you guys. And so Tom Vitale, who I produced with sometimes, he had read this short story by a British author named E.C. Tubb in 1970 something. He was in middle school. And he always remembered it. And he said, check out this story. It's really cool. I had this writer, Macon Blair, write a screenplay for it. Macon's fantastic too. And so we checked it out and we submitted it to them, and they latched onto it. And then we went into tons of rewrites. I attached my buddy Rusty Cundiff to direct, and then we spent the entire pandemic writing and rewriting the script until we got it to a place that we thought was great. But it's about this guy, and the short story is about this too, who finds a ring that allows him to reset time 57 seconds, and he's kind of a browbeaten, down and out guy, and he quickly uses it to kind of climb the social ladder, but pretty soon it turns into his downward spiral and becomes the undoing of him. So it's a bit of it's sci-fi, but it's kind of like, it's more in the sci-fi realm of, did you ever see the movie Time Crimes by Nacho Vigalondo?
Oh yeah,
it's a really cool movie. It's kind of like that kind of a sci-fi where it's like a character study in this science fiction wrapper. I mean, there's tons of sci-fi stuff in it, but it's really about Josh Hutcherson, his relationship with Morgan Freeman and Greg German, who are the two opposing forces kind of pulling him in different directions. So really, and Josh is so damn good in this movie. I'm a huge fan of Josh's. He's the first person I thought of and the first person I went to, and luckily he accepted it because I loved him in Future Man. I don't know if you've seen that show Future Man, but the character in this movie reminded me of his character in Future Man, which he absolutely nails. And he nails in this movie too. He's a perfect leading man. Very Michael J. Fox-ish.
Ah, yes. Well, then you definitely can't go wrong. I saw the character name that had Faust, and it's like, well, I wonder if is that an on the nose reference, or where are we going with this?
It is an on the nose reference, but it's an on the nose reference because yes, it makes sense in context of the story, but the legal made his change. His name was Franklin Fox, I believe, and legal came back and they said you can't use that last name because it's some silly metric they use. Like there's 3 people in California with that name, so you have to change the name. And so the director's like, Franklin Faust.
Wow, that's something I've never run into before. I didn't even know that was a thing. So
it's a silly thing, yeah. It's a clearance report, they call it, and they break down the whole script. So you send them the script and they come back with pages of notes on everything that you can't say, because it's statistically likely meaning like 0.1% to cause a lawsuit for the distributor later down the road. So it's like names of products, showing a car. It's like the notes, they get really minute. It's like, make sure when you shoot this car that the license plate frame doesn't have a logo on it and stuff like that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, the joy, that's the joyous part of filmmaking, is dealing with that part of it.
That is nuts. Now, You Might Be, was that the one with Allison Hannigan?
Yeah, Allison Hannigan and Fran Kranz, another underrated actor. That guy is a black belt.
That I have to admit, I've been a fan of both of them for a long time, and I just have to wonder what it's. Have you ever been in a position? This is what I was thinking, because I try and put myself in your shoes. Okay, so I'm going to direct a film. Who would I feel like I would have trouble directing? It's like I would geek out so much. Like, I really like everything else you've been in. Do whatever you want. Has there ever been an instance where you've been putting a something together? It's like, yeah, just go ahead. I don't even have anything to say.
I mean, luckily not. And admittedly, I think it's definitely because, and it's one of the benefits of growing up in the industry. So it's like I've always been around really talented artists, and my father was one himself. So it's like I know them really well and what they need to be able to create. And I try to support that. And so and, and everybody in our industry feels akin to me in some strange way, right? Like Will Smith, I worked with him. I'm a huge fan of Will's. And so that was, that was a trip working with him because I grew up with him on his show. But at the same time, and I found this with a lot of the A-list celebrities, I mean, the reason they are where they are is because they're such wonderful people. Like he was so inviting, like showed up and he had left a, gift basket with presents in the trailer, just welcoming you to set. It's like, that really makes you feel at home. And so I never get that. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. And like, I've done 2 movies with Chris Pratt, who's a huge star now, right? But it's like the first movie I did with him was 20 years ago. And so we go way back. It's like, I've never experienced that kind of a thing with actors. And plus, because I am an actor, it's like, we all speak the same language,
Makes sense to me. So okay, about Devil's Due, I've got to ask: did you read the source material before you got into it, or did you get the script first? Or was this something that you were already aware of?
I got the script first. The script actually came from my friend and my manager, Josh Kesselman, also a really talented producer. And he brought me this script a while ago. It was like 2016, and he said, "Hey man, I think this is special." I read it, I agreed, and we said, "Let's put this thing together." And then after that, I read the book multiple times. I love the book. And the book has tons of detail, especially like world building detail that's not in the screenplay. But Robert Knott did a great job with the screenplay. But yeah, so this one was a rare instance that it didn't come from me. It came from a partner of mine, and we just really connected with the material, and we decided to run with it.
The screenwriter, he did Appaloosa, correct?
Appaloosa, that's right. Yeah.
Does that kind of have a similar? I mean, it's hard to avoid whether you're an actor or writer, whatever. There are certain kind of habits and lanes that you go into. Does it have a similar feel? Did you notice certain notes that's like, oh, I saw Appaloosa and that was awesome in these ways, and I see that this also is kind of present in this adaptation of this book?
Definitely, yeah. I think Robert is a very particular writer. He's you could definitely tell if you read Appaloosa and you read this screenplay, you could tell it's the same writer. I've read other stuff of Robert's that hasn't been produced yet. He has a very distinct voice, so I could pick his out. If you gave me a couple of scripts without a title page on it, I could probably most definitely. It's this very kind of country poetic kind of a vibe to what he does.
So okay, so going with that kind of country poetic, anytime you get a draw, I still think that people will associate it, just because there's sometimes hard not to. It's when you've got a story that revolves around drugs, specifically meth. It's hard to not have. It's like, oh, is this like Breaking Bad? So occasionally, it's like I might be concerned. It's like, well, is this going to be similar? But seeing what I've seen, and seeing the sheer talent involved, the number of the actors that are lined up on this, I guess what I'm asking is how surprised do you think people are going to be when they see this film? Do you think, because even when you see the trailer, a lot of trailers give everything away. I don't think that this one did at all, but do you think it's like they're going to see the trailer and go, oh, this might be good, and then when they experience the film and see it, how do you think that people are going to react to it?
Well, I've been reading the reviews, so I have a sense of how people are going to react to it, and the common thread seems to be people are drawn to the performances, which is really what it's about. I mean, it is it's a drama, it's a thriller, completely different tone than Breaking Bad. Although there's a sequence which may be in the trailer where the lead character ends up in his underwear running around. So it immediately evokes memories of the Breaking Bad pilot because it's such a specific thing that happens to exist in the novel too. So there's a similar beat, but it's dark. It's much darker. Like Billy is at his darkest, and it's Billy's doing exactly what Billy does well. He's playing a very dangerous redneck man, right? So it's I think that's the thing that people are going to come and stay for, is the performances from the tremendous actors from Billy and from Robin and Jackie Earle Haley.
In the past, you've said that you prefer character-driven stuff anyway. What really excited you about this particular story, whether it's about the initial character development of the individuals that are the characters in the film, or whether it's the character growth that occurs? What kind of had that, it's like, wow, this part is magic to me for you?
It was the arc of the lead character played by Jacob, which is Hopper Penn's Hopper Penn's role, which is Sean Penn's son and Robin's son. And he just had a really interesting journey. It's a maturation story. It's a coming of age story, and those are some of my favorite genres, like Stand by Me. And it's this kid who's coming of age, and he's trying to get out from underneath the thumb of his murderous father by all means necessary. And his father makes it so hard for him. He's withholding his wages, so he doesn't have any money. Like, he works for his father, and he can't get out. So it was following this character and trying to guess how he's going to get away from what might as well be the most dangerous man in the world, and go pursue another life and break this cycle of violence that he's been born into. So just following that maturation story is what drew me to it.
When you're telling a story, how do you balance the exposition, the character growth that's needed, and the action element that is inevitably going to be a part of this, because both are necessary to make the chemistry really work? But if either is too heavy, it can sometimes cause its own problems. How do you address that kind of aspect of the filmmaking process?
Always in the screenplay, I would say, like, if you pay really close attention to the screenplay and you're surgical with it, then that balance should be there when you get to shoot it. Good example is on The Magnificent Seven. That screenplay was rewritten multiple times during production. And the first draft by Nick Palazzo, who wrote True Detective, it was this really character-driven, dramatic piece, and one of the best scripts I ever read. At some point, more action was infused into the script, to the point once you get to Act 2, the action never stops. And it's from a spectacle point of view, it's really appealing, right? There's tons of stuff going on, tons of violence, and it's very exciting throughout. But you lose so much of the character throughout, and a lot of the great stuff that Nick did in the back half of Act 2 and Act 3 in that script just completely went away. Bumblebee, I think, does a great job at balancing that, because the Transformer movies start getting a little crazy with losing characters completely in exchange for robots, which is cool, and there's an appeal to that too. But Bumblebee kind of reeled it back, and I thought they did a really nice job of mixing all of that science fiction spectacle with character development. So, and it should all exist in the screenplay, because that's your blueprint, right? It's a roadmap. So if it's working there, it should work on screen.
Was this film one of those instances where you're talking about earlier, it's like, oh, I already know who these people are and I want them for these roles, for these particular things? Or was there a part of the process where it's like, will Robin Wright and Billy Bob Thornton have that kind of that click that we're hoping that they'll have? Was it something that you just knew ahead of time, or you had readings like, okay, yeah, we know that this is the right group of people?
Every time we get somebody really exceptional to sign on, it feels very strategic. Like, Billy is the perfect person for the role. There's nobody that's going to do it as well as him. And for 57 seconds, it was the same thing with Morgan. It's like we kind of, before we even approached Morgan, we had him in mind when we were writing it because of who the character is. It just was just a really good fit for Morgan. So it's very, very strategic who we go out to, because we've also been in spots where if we're casting a movie and the idea of the perfect person to play that role it's not obvious right away. And we'll say, well, maybe this person could do it. And we'll throw out an offer here and offer there. And it doesn't always work out because it's not like you're not in tune with the universe, for lack of a better, explanation, right? But with like in Billy and Robin's case, is like this was so perfect for him. We knew that they had to do this role. And so we approached them with that conviction, and it works out. Same thing with Morgan, and we're doing another one with Carl Urban, which is the exact same thing. It wasn't like we made a bunch of offers to a bunch of different people. It's like, no, this is like, we know this actor's work, we know this script, and there isn't a better person for it. So that's what we're going to do. And it works.
That definitely makes sense to me. I'll watch Carl Urban in anything, and he's always great.
He is great. So you'll love this next one because it's Carl Urban doing what Carl Urban does best.
I'm definitely looking forward to that. So you've been around this industry. I don't know if you know our podcast at all. We love intersections of different things. So a lot of our podcast talks about the intersection of film, television, and works that were originally based in comic strips and comic books and things like that. Now, were you ever a comic book fan? Are you currently a comic book fan at all?
I was, and I am, and I have a huge library of comics that I gave to my son. He inherited them, and I hope he's taking care of them because there's some nice ones in there.
Well, I was going to say your film release date was already competing against Quantum Mania for the same release frames. Like, oh, that's a little rough, but it won't matter because you can watch as many movies as you want.
It is true.
But so with comics being so pervasive now, having such large just catalogs of films based on properties that are comic strip or comic book in origin, have you ever wished that you could play a role? Well, I guess a better way to put it, I always ask this to everybody. If you could be any comic book character in a film or a television series, who would you be?
John McClane. He's not a comic book. He's from a novel.
Still good.
I would do any of them. You know why? Because it's a great excuse to stay in impeccable shape. You get a personal trainer. And you get to do, it's just, those movies are so much fun to make, right? It's like there's nothing that's too heavy. You got to do an excellent job, right? But it's like it's a lot of fun. But yeah, I even though it's not a comic book character, I'd go John McClane. I don't think I'm the right casting for Thor. Pratt, what he's doing with Guardians, like I can't do that. That's his thing, right? It's very specific. I can't imagine it working without his personality. But I'd do any of them. It's Spider-Verse. I'd play that even though it's animated.
Voice acting is so much fun. It gives you this level of flexibility that you can just completely focus on the audio aspect. That's so cool. Well, I would say if I were to cast you, this character's already been cast one time in the films, but it's in a segment of the films that aren't going to come back. Well, they are going to come back because they're just going to be bringing them back into the MCU. But it's still years down the road with the X-Men sort of stuff. And I think it was Kevin Bacon that had the role previously, but I think it's like a Sebastian Shaw that would get you some mutton chops.
Yeah,
the big mutton chops and kind of some regal clothing. I feel like that would be a perfect casting for
that. Is good. See, he knows better than me. I'm gonna tell my agent right after this. I'm gonna say, Sebastian Shaw, go get it.
It's a great villain. It's a great villain role. It's a very dignified, but so much fun.
I do love villains. They're my favorite.
All right. So, okay. As a family man, I bet this is a question that'll come home, strike home directly. I always ask this as often as I can. We love things that bring people together, and nothing brings people together like food. So we always ask, are you a pizza person? And if you are, what kind of a pizza person are you? Because I'm sure you got to bring enough to keep the kids happy whenever you get that pie. Are you a Chicago slice, a New York slice? Do you have some place that you always go because that is the best pizza ever? What do you eat?
I am. It's probably my favorite food, and I wish I could eat it every day, but sadly, I can't. And I don't discriminate too much because I love meat. So give me all the meats. Sometimes it's been in the mood for the barbecue chicken pizza. I was at Disney a couple days ago, and they had a peanut butter and jelly pizza. That was delicious too. But there's one place by my house. What's it called? It's called the Roma Pizza Roma. It's way better than it should be. It's like buffalo mozzarella. It's basically a margarita pizza with buffalo mozzarella and chicken, and oh, it's so delicious. But huge pizza fan. It's seriously my favorite food, and I wish I could eat it for every meal. I'd be a very happy and fat man.
That is awesome. Okay, well, I have to remind all of our listeners to take the opportunity to go out and see Devil's Peak. It looks awesome. I mean, if you can't get impressed just by the fact that it's got Robin Wright, Billy Bob Thornton, Jackie Earl Haley, I mean, come on. This is a no-brainer. This is a film that you should see and have some fun with, because I'm fairly certain that's going to be an obvious love of the film when you get a chance to see it. But for the next stuff that you've got coming out, if the Pudding people want to follow you, I know you've got a huge social media presence. Where would they go to find out what the next big thing that you're going to be involved in is going to be?
Yeah, I tell anybody to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, and it's just my name and my face. And I post regularly anytime we have something coming out, or anytime a podcast like this gets dropped, I post it to there. And that's probably the easiest way to keep up to date.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I have had an absolute blast, and you, of course, are welcome back anytime. We love seeing the new stuff that people have to help distract us from the world at large, and you do a fantastic job, good sir.
Good, yeah, with a lot of new stuff coming out, and it has been fun. You wanna invite me back anytime? I'll be glad to be here.
It'd be great. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks, Ken.